I need to open with an apology. This came from Travis, and I'm just going to read you the email.
Okay.
And it's going to become clear what's happened.
Dear Will and Charlie, why does it always rain on me?
Nice. I love a mohawked semi-folk rock band. Travis says, hope this finds you well. Apologies for not getting in touch sooner. Crazy times. This was sent in 2020, May 2020. So it was indeed, it was the craziest of times. It was the crazier of times.
Well, he starts with an apology for not getting in touch sooner, which makes me feel less bad about the fact that we haven't been back in touch.
Yeah. Now, what has happened is he said last time we spoke was via Instagram. So he's obviously reached out via Instagram. And I tend to operate the Instagram account. So this is contact he had with me. And I was telling you about my podcast with the hope of getting you and Will to come on an episode.
Okay.
I understand that during these times it can be difficult to get you both on. So attached is a brief outline of how the episode would flow. This is only a rough outline, and as you would be aware, things can get off track easily. But let me break things down for you a bit more. My podcast is called Breaking Down, in brackets, the pod. It's a new podcast to take a look at existing podcasts. Okay. It's a behind-the-mic look at not only some of my favorite podcasts, but other popular and not so popular Australian podcasts. To give existing listeners an insight on how it all comes together without giving away too many secrets, of course. Also, to give listeners out there in podcast land the opportunity to find new podcasts that they may not have come across yet. It's designed to be smart and informative while also being fun and a bit of entertainment in a world that needs it.
So here's what I would say firstly, just based on this. That's a good idea. I would absolutely listen to that podcast if I knew about it, if I was aware of it.
Breaking Down the pod. So given we are in lockdown, I'm doing these via Zoom.
Yep.
Zoom. Do you remember that?
Remember Zoom,
Adorable.
Guys? Yeah.
Adorable. Podcast via Zoom. Once we're able to lock in a date and time, I'll send you a meeting link before we record. We can have a bit of chat to get the flow going. Obviously, knows us well, knows that we have to talk to Podcast Mike to warm up. So once the episode is up, I'll push it out to my socials. My aim is to get 3 more records, yours being one of them, before uploading the first 6 episodes. Blah, 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 blah. So Travis has attached an outline for the show. Now, clearly, whatever happened, we forgot to get in touch. Travis, I apologize. I don't know what was going... Well, I know what was going on in the middle of 2020, so that probably explains why I didn't get back to you straight away. But I do apologize. I'm sure that Will and I probably had intentions of doing it, and then for whatever reason, we just got sidetracked. But what I thought we'd do as a little... to make up for it is that he sent in the questions that he wanted to ask us on breaking down the pod. So it's not perfect, but I thought what we could do, Travis, is answer your questions on this episode of TOFOP. And then, look, I don't know if your podcast is still up and running, or, if you'd like to have us on again at some date, or one of us on at some date, I'm sure we can arrange it. But consider this a mulligan / do-over for us not responding to your very first email 2 years ago. And by the way, he's breaking down the pod. Excellent artwork. It's a kind of satire, a spoof of the Breaking Bad with the,
okay, great,
all the
good stuff,
element letters and stuff. Breaking down the pod. Okay, so let's start with the first question. Tell us who you are, a brief outline of your podcast, and throw in your socials. Okay. Hi, I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson. Hello, and thank you for watching.
We do a podcast called TOFOP. We do many podcasts, but this one in particular is called TOFOP. It's really a comedy conversation between 2 old mates. We tend to talk about, personal anecdotes, little bits of news items. There are some recurring themes that have happened over the years. The most famous probably being the Bin trilogy, in which I was obsessed with what was happening with my bins. More recently, we've talked about the boy band 5, and even more recently, Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, we thought it was cool things for cool people, but we've realized we're just here for each other's bullshit.
That's right. Nothing for everyone. Okay, so these are some generic questions. So we can alternate, I guess, or we can team up on this. Where did your podcast journey begin?
Good stuff. Where did our podcast journey begin?
I think Smodcast. Yes. I think that was the first podcast I started listening to regularly. And I think I don't know if we recommended it to each other or we found it independent of each other, but I do distinctly remember you were doing some trial shows of stand-up, and I was being paid to document it. I was riding along with you and shooting the shows and some behind-the-scenes stuff. And so we had a lot of time to kill, and we would listen to podcasts in the car. And I remember that was the first kind of seed of, we could do this, because Smodcast essentially was Kevin Smith and his mate and producer Scott Mosier just bullshitting, telling personal anecdotes, funny news items, occasionally some recurring themes. So that is, I think, where it began. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I remember really liking podcasts a lot as soon as I was aware of them. I did have faith that the way that they are now, where everybody knows about podcasts and what a podcast is and how to get a podcast, and everybody has a fucking podcast. I suspected this was always going to happen because it felt compelling to me. It felt to me like, wouldn't it be good if radio was interesting and wasn't full with all the bullshit the radio was filled with? But then also there was just something about, I know that there's that real meme that people are like, oh, everyone's got a podcast now. Oh, you got a podcast, have you? Yeah, cool. That's fine, I think. I think that's a really good thing. Everyone can play guitar, and some people are just going to play it by themselves at home, and some people are going to, become a professional guitarist. I think it's cool that everybody has access to be able to do that, to make a thing of their own. So I always thought it was cool. I thought if we got in early, we might capitalize on when it grew, that we might be pushed to the top. That did not happen. We stayed about where we were the entire way through. We got there's no real value. This is what I will tell you. There's no real value in us being the original prospectors. I mean, of course we weren't. There were already people mining for gold in their hills but we were around.
Not many.
Towards the start, right?
The only other Australian ones I can remember. I remember Lawrence Lung was doing one. That was actually when I first became aware that, we could possibly do this. I think Lawrence, it was either an article written about him or he posted it on socials. It was him, I think, with Andrew McClellan sitting at a table with microphones. I'm like, oh, fuck, they're not even a studio. That's just someone's kitchen or something like that. And then Josh Thomas, he had one.
That's Josh Thomas has a friend or something.
Friend and friend.
Yeah.
So I remember his friend, who's a comic as well, I think, or a writer, Tom Walker. Is his
That's
name?
Right. Tom Ward.
Tom Ward. Sorry, apologies. I remember because we let your management token know that we were going to be doing a podcast, and someone said, "Oh, we can put you in touch with Josh and Tom if you want some advice." And I remember sending Tom an email with, "Hey, man, we're thinking of doing it." And he didn't seem that interested.
He was like, get off my lawn. You fuck off.
I think he had better things to do than help us start a rival podcast for some reason. Okay, so next question. What was the inspiration for the initial idea and the subject matter of the podcast?
What I will say is I often say that we are from the time. This is how, the difference between our show and other shows is podcasts didn't need to be about anything. It was the fact that you had one. That was enough. People would like all these disparate podcasts because they were kind of into podcasts. You'd find this audience of people going, oh, I'll listen to this podcast about science, or I'll listen to this podcast about something else, because what I actually like is podcasts. And I remember those early days of the LA Podcast Festival and things like that, where you're just this is a community of people who are combined because they like these shows, but also because they genuinely have discovered this new form of entertainment that they were original fans of something that has now grown into a global phenomenon, one of the most powerful mediums in the entire world. But they were in on the ground level. They recognized that it was a cool thing before everybody else. But we didn't think that your show had to be about something. We just thought it was enough that we had a show.
But I think in terms of the inspiration, clearly Smodcast. So I'd say there was some stuff, definitely in the early days, we tried to ape or recreate or do our take on, definitely the hypotheticals. That was a Smodcast thing, is they would just come up. And, Kevin Smith is and they had a really good balance where Kevin is very verbose and, can take a story anywhere. And then you got a really dry, funny Scott Mosier, just kind of playing the Spock to his Captain Kirk almost. So I think we sort of tried hard with that stuff at first, and we did a bit of role playing, like, because that's a big thing that they did in Smodcast, where they would say, "Isn't this a funny story?" Oh, so imagine you're the guy. How would that go? So I think we tried that initially, and then quickly realized it's not our forte. We just sort of backed away,
and definitely the dirty talk, like
dirty humor.
edginess of it, like. Because
edgelord humor,
because it was this new thing that felt a bit secret. It also felt a bit like that was what it was. It was like the stuff that was too edgy to be on the radio. I remember that Limo and I had a podcast when we were doing the radio show together. That was like an up late, after dark sort of version, and it was like dirty jokes, because that kind of felt like what podcasting is. And I know that's like, right. I mean,
That was a brief thing, wasn't it? Where all the commercial radio shows released their pods, where it was like, you can say, "Fuck, guys, go for it." So it's just all that. That's all it was.
Right. So yeah, I think that was definitely like, and we used to get drunk early as well. Like we would drink a lot.
Oh my God, slurring. Like I think you would bring a 6-pack over. Was like Yeah, it was. There would be some messy episodes at the start of it, and then I think I can't remember. Like, I don't think there was like a clear delineation point. It wasn't like we just sort of decided we weren't going to do that. It just evolved. Roundabout, I think, where Semi-Cav got involved. So maybe 6 years into it,
when we had someone more professional that we had to like talk to occasionally, who would judge us on like what we were doing. Yeah, I guess it did make a difference.
Well, that's when we started getting things like, that's when we got to produce like someone to produce the show. Obviously, it was Mike Howell before it was Podcast Mike. But then, the idea of getting Foz to do original artwork, I think it just sort of became. We decided we wanted a bit more of an identity.
We were like, maybe if we like try at this, it might become more successful. Again, I need to point out for anyone listening for advice, it did not.
It didn't. Narrator voice.
It did not.
But I think one of the things we worked out, and this is something we discussed in the last 12 months, where I was sort of saying, like, have we shot ourselves in the foot by not being like formatted? We make it harder for ourselves. And then you made the quite salient point. If it was formatted, we probably wouldn't be able to do it. If it required any more prep than it already has, then we probably wouldn't be able to do it. I think that is the secret to the success. Will is right. We haven't become super successful. Maybe if we had sort of like worked and honed a formula that was, marketable and commercial and stuff, we could have pushed this. Yeah,
like anyone who gives you, I've worked in those areas where they would just say, "Hey, this area is working really well for you," whether it be like superhero chat or like whatever it would be. Just lean into that, lean into that world, create that market. But we're a show where if you tune in for like 3-4 weeks in a row, you're like, "Oh, I love pop culture. They're talking about Top Gun. This is fun." And then if you tune in for the next 4 weeks, we're talking about fucking bins. Like there is, there's no consistency to like what the tone or attitude or like subject matter of the content will be. And I love that. Like, I think it's the reason we still do it. And the reason is A, that it is easy to do. B, I honestly think it is. What would we do that would be unique? This is unique, like, because of the way that it came about and the sort of show it is. There is no, I mean, there may be other shows like TOFOP, but I certainly wouldn't listen to them. It's a fucking rabble. But I think that like we just like you've got your "Till We Die" t-shirt on. Like, this is the formula that means that we can keep doing this. If we want to just keep doing this for as long as we want to do it, this is the formula.
To see the full video, join our Patreon.
Patreon.com/TOFOP.